Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 182 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined as always by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, everybody. We are a father-son duo here to talk about all things college football, and specifically our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, a podcast by college football fans for college football fans. And today, as we mentioned, we'll be talking about Nebraska's beatdown against Indiana. Did not go the way the Huskers were hoping. And we'll also talk about the big games from this past week. There were some really close games, a lot of good ones, actually, and kind of talk about what's going on in week 9 of college football, our upcoming game against Ohio State, and where we're feeling about the season. So a lot to get to today.
Right.
But before we dive into all that, we're going to stick with our tradition and open up a cold beverage. I think Husker Nation could use one after last Saturday. I've got myself a Golden Road Brewing Company Mango Cart.
All right. And I have a Pepe Loco Mexican style lager. It's a beer that's made in New Mexico, I believe. Santa Fe, New Mexico. And was a reference to me from our good friend Wes Nelson.
Okay. You mentioned that last week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. Boy, Husker Nation does need
that. You're speaking for Husker Nation there?
I am.
All right. So, yes, on the last podcast, we flipped roles a little bit. You were the optimist. You thought that we were going to win against Indiana. You predicted we would win 35-28. Well, I predicted that we would lose, but in a closer game, 27-21. But we did mention that there was the possibility we could get blown out. We knew this Indiana team was good. And it turned out that way. It was 56-7 drumming of our beloved Cornhuskers. But I will say, when you look at the stats of the game, it goes to show that it was more competitive than the score would make you think. We had 304 yards of total offense. Well, they had 495. So our defense was really not able to stop them. And even if we had been able to score on some of those opportunities, we may well have, given up points to them anyways. But we should have come away from that game with more points on the board for sure.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you see some of the drives that we did, and Coach Rule talked about that, I probably spent more time really listening intently to his press conference that he had on Monday, not the one right after the game, but his normal Monday press conference than any other thing that was said or written. I avoided social media and that sort of stuff regarding the game because the overreaction that always happens, whether it be positive or negative, is just not something I'm interested in. I wanted to give myself a few days and not spoil my brain with all that crap.
Right. It's probably smart.
But to your point, I think that, if you break down and watch the film, and that was one of Coach Rule's main emphasis is the film shows you what happened, is real, right? Like, that's not something you can ignore. But at the same time, he didn't really view it as the end of the world, so to speak, like some people do, right? And he just recognizes that they got to get better. He absolutely admitted that he was surprised. His coaches were surprised. They thought they were prepared and they thought they would play well, and the guys didn't execute. And he brought up a really important point. We talk a lot about the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half, the middle 8, as it's referred to. And at 4 minutes to go in the first half, it was 14-7.
Right.
And if we manage those last 4 minutes better, right, and we do our assignments, we don't make the mistakes we made, and we just focus and play football, then maybe we're in a tighter game, right? And then probably the only thing I didn't like was Coach Rule acknowledging that when we got down 28-7 in the second half, he felt like that they had to shift the game plan to more of a passing focused game plan than even they intended to do, which I find hard to believe because we passed it 6 or 7, 8 times out of the first 10 plays were pass plays. And of course the beginning plays are often scripted. Now, the fact that we were backed up on that first series also didn't help. Maybe they pulled off the script. I don't know the details, but the bottom line is if you're trying to establish the running game, starting your first drive on the 2-yard line or whatever isn't a good way to do that. And then the other thing was just tackling. Defensively, you mentioned that. Tackling was atrocious. Guys were not in their assigned gaps. And then when they did, have somebody in the right spot, those running backs from Indiana were able to make them miss, or they just tackled poorly. I'll say it's a 50-50 deal. I think those running backs were really good at shifting their center mass, just to one side or the other, and a lot of our guys just whiffed. I mean, I couldn't believe how many missed tackles we had.
Right. Yeah, well, I did not watch the press conference like you did, but I did see some, highlighted comments from the coaches, including both Rule and Satterfield and Tony White. And they all took some of the blame on themselves, saying, we made some mistakes. Yep. Satterfield saying, I need to, pay more attention to the running game, put more focus on that. Tony White said, I called some bad plays. I called some crazy formations or whatever. I took some risks, that didn't pay off, that kind of thing. So the coaching staff is kind of falling on the sword here and saying, the players didn't execute in certain areas, but also we came in with a poor game plan, and Indiana obviously used the bye week to great effect.
Right. And again, Coach Rule said, I thought we had a good bye week. I thought we had utilized it well, and we repped all the things that we thought we were going to see, and we saw most of those things, but then we didn't execute like we did in practice. We didn't do the things that we have been coaching to do, right? So some of it is, it's not that they were seeing a bunch of stuff they had never seen. They just saw it being executed at a level that was way higher than they were practicing at, right? And so when they saw it on Saturday, they weren't ready for it. They were not ready for the moment.
Right. I actually saw in a preview, somebody did a preview for the game, and they had mentioned how we had kind of turned things around on turnovers, right? Which is the number one problem from last year. And I want to say we were +6 going into that game. Yep. We were in the upper echelon of the country in terms of turnover margin. But unfortunately, this game, we slid right back down. We had 3 interceptions and 2 fumbles, so a total of 5 turnovers, while Indiana only had 1 interception. So they firmly won the turnover battle, and many of those turnovers were at the end of a long drive. We had some nice long drives, and then we would throw an interception and get out of there with no points at all.
Or fumble, right? Remember the 4th and 1 fumble early in the game. I mean, we might have been 7-7 if we don't do that, right? I think at that point. So that's the thing. When you, it was ugly to watch, but the magnitude of the score doesn't bother me so much as the continued errors and the appearance that they could do whatever they wanted, right? This was a complete blowout. They were in name the score category, right? That's how good Indiana looked compared to us. And that's the part that scares me a little bit. I'm concerned. But at the same time, it's the kind of thing where you watch the film, you learn from it, you highlight that what Coach Rule is trying to get his guys to understand is that if you make a mistake on first down that causes a play that we call on first down that could have and potentially, should have gained positive yards, maybe even a first down. But because you missed your block, our guy gets tackled for a 3-yard loss, right? Then that leads to second down, which then leads to third down, and eventually it leads to, a 4th down situation where we're punting or where there's a pick or something like that. Something else negative happens. And so it's connecting the dots and understanding that your job on every single play, that's what he means when he talks about competing. It's about being locked in every single play at every single moment of the game. And I think he's challenging our guys to really rise to that, right? Because they didn't, obviously, on Saturday. Now, they have in a lot of other games. So I'm not going to throw all of that observation out the window. And it's just sad, of course, that the timing is such that we now have to go and face a juggernaut who is likely to do the same thing to us. And that's a team that if they do this to us again, that is going to be more expected. But it's going to be harder to accept now because then it'll be 2 in a row, right? But we're still on track. I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the year. What did we think? 6 wins was the absolute what we need to have, and we still have a chance to get that. If we can get a 6th win and still have 2 or 3 games left, for example, then by golly, we might be able to get a 7th win. And if we can have 7 wins and go to a bowl game, a chance to get an 8th, this is still going to be a season of great progress for us, right?
Right.
And we have a freshman quarterback. We lost both of our left tackles literally before we even played, 2 games, and so we're playing with a true freshman at left tackle, and so some of our best defensive players have missed a lot of action. But we're also developing a lot of talent. We've got a lot of young guys that are contributing significantly on offense. And frankly, the wide receivers who we thought were going to be a really good, strong part of our team have not shown up to be a strong part of our team. They are a weakness that we have had all season that I keep hoping is going to get better. And if I'm going to get into criticisms of things, it's going to end up being criticisms of Matt Rule and his staff and how they have not been able to make the improvements in the areas that are obvious weaknesses. Special teams, the wide receiver route running, the wide receiver blocking. These are areas that should have gotten so much focus already. We should have already been able to see demonstrative improvement, and we're not.
And to be fair, we did see, I'm looking at the stats here, we did see certain improvements, like, we were able to at least punt it right when we got stopped, when we didn't turn the ball over. We were able to punt it away decently well. We had 6 penalties for 46 yards. Well, they had 4 for 46. So we were basically even on penalties, right? Not an absurd number. So that's a good thing to see. So, there are like nuggets you can take away that, like, to kind of counteract the Nebraska fans that are saying the sky is falling, our season's doomed. On the other hand, I'm sure Nebraska fans remember how we got to 5 wins last year with several more games left to go, and then kind of felt like we were cursed and lost a bunch of close games and weren't able to get to 6 wins. And now I think this puts extra emphasis not on the Ohio State game next week, but the UCLA game after that. That's a definitely still a winnable game for us and the most winnable game left in our season. So if we get our butts kicked by Indiana and Ohio State and then aren't able to beat UCLA, then I'll be very concerned for our last 3 games.
Absolutely correct. I think you're absolutely right. That UCLA game looms large for us. Frankly, how we come out and compete against Ohio State also looms very large for us. We better be ready to just go out there and compete, knowing that, hey, the outcome's probably going to be that we're going to lose. But that doesn't mean we go out there and lay an egg. It means you compete and you find out what you can do. You know what I mean?
Right. That's what I would like to see. But when we get to our predictions, I'm going to predict that they cream us. That's going to be my prediction.
I think you might be right about that.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help that Ohio State, like you mentioned, they are coming off of a bye, and their last game, right, was when they lost to Oregon by 1 point, a very close run affair, right? So they'll be looking to make a statement. It's a home game for them. So we have 2 back-to-back away games. Now, to your point, we knew going into the season that this game was going to be hard. It was a probable loss. So unlike the Indiana game, there's no real expectation for us to win this one. I'm sure I haven't looked at the spread, but I'm sure it's massive.
Oh yes.
So, hopefully that lets us play with some freedom. But my main thing is for us to just get out of there without major injuries. Like, obviously the worst case scenario would be like Dylan gets sacked a bunch and gets hurt, right? And now we're in real trouble.
And he got banged up this week. I mean, everybody's saying, oh, he's fine. He's not fine. His ankle, he was limping most of the Indiana game. You can't tell me that he doesn't have an issue.
Right. So there were only 2 official sacks, but there were plenty of plays where he threw it. He did get the throw out, but he was getting hit as he was getting thrown or got hit afterwards. So yeah, I noticed that too. And I'll admit, I stopped watching after we turned the ball over in the third quarter and they had a huge run back and then scored another touchdown. Like at that point I was done. And I saw the play-by-play, so I know what happens after that, but yeah, it was a tough one.
Yep. But again, it's just one game and we can't let this beat us the rest of the season, which is kind of what happened in the previous year, right? Where we let that, oh boy, here we go again mentality, creep into our psyche. And then we became a shell of our previous selves, right? Like, you've got to continue to grow and evolve offensively. Now, Coach Rule talks about, well, you can't just start running a bunch of different running plays and stuff. You have to execute the plays that we already have been training through spring practice and fall camp and through the season, right? We've got enough offense. We just don't have enough offense that we can run effectively. So we got to get better at running the offense that we have. And but I'm actually encouraged if I actually see from Satterfield more of a commitment to the running game in future games, because I really believe that's a big part of our problem. Is you've got to be able to establish the running game, and that doesn't mean you beat your head against the wall, but it means you have to have enough creativity. And we did not use our fullback nearly enough in this game, not nearly enough. And most of our running game was really basic, kind of zone read type handoffs. Even though that Dylan is not running it. So it's really just a handoff, and we're doing a blocking scheme up front, and we're either going inside the guard or we're going off the tackle, and that's just so easy to read. You need to have a more complicated running game than that, and we didn't even really try. We tried a lot of bubble screens and stuff, but we didn't do many of the end around type things that we had done, in previous games. So our running game became extremely predictable. And coach keeps harping on the fact that we have so many times now this season had running backs who got tackled basically by an ankle, right? We were one guy away from a fairly extensive running play, but we didn't do it. It didn't happen, right? And to some extent, that's because our perimeter blocking is so bad that there are times when those guys shouldn't be there that soon, because our perimeter blocker is supposed to have secured a block and they didn't. Or it's the running back not running with high knee action and letting himself get pulled from behind, by a shoestring, right? And that is unacceptable as well.
Right. Yep. So there's a lot for us to improve. I was hopeful after that disappointing Rutgers game, where we won, but it was very ugly with us doing it, that our offense would show some more life in this Indiana game. And in certain ways it did, in that, we were able to drive on a Indiana team that was good, but they also, I remember the commentators were talking about how their secondary was like the weakness of their team. And yet, there were plenty of times where, like you said, our wide receivers weren't able to get open against this, mediocre secondary of Indiana. So how are they going to do against Ohio State's next week, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and the thing that I don't like is I look at those guys and I don't see the level of precision and or what I believe is effort to actually go. I mean, they go out there and it looks like they're jogging. I want to see a guy who looks like he's literally sprinting at full speed, then planting his foot and cutting in or out or whatever. And when he cuts, he doesn't cut at 90 degrees. He cuts tighter than 90 degrees, about 80 or 75 degrees. So he's coming back to the football, right? That's the way you're supposed to do it. That's the way good wide receivers run routes. And they're not doing that. And then when it comes to blocking, I mean, even though they're big guys, they're trying to block somebody standing straight up. You need to use your bulk and your size to your advantage, and you need to be coming down on guys and just blowing them up. And they're not doing that. So it's just specific things like that that are so obvious.
Well, talking about that Ohio State game, like I said, I'm going to predict that we lose. I'm going to be my hopeful side is going to say that it's not as bad as Indiana, and that we do, show some backbone / Ohio State maybe goes up so early that they, bring in their second and third team guys and the score isn't run up as much or whatever. So I'm going to say that we lose 17-49 versus Ohio State.
Okay. Yep. Well, you know what? I would agree with you on that. I think it might be worse than that. I'm not sure this is the team that we get better or get well on, and I think they smell blood and water. And you have to remember one thing. Dylan Raiola decommitted from Ohio State.
Right.
Remember that? He was committed to Ohio State for longer, I think, than even he was committed to Georgia. So that team, they all know him. He was on recruiting visits there and stuff. And Ryan Day and his coaching staff, they have a burr in their saddle about that. So right. I guarantee you there is no let up, man. They're going to come after Dylan. I think they're going to bring the kitchen sink because basically the previous two teams have demonstrated that if you come right at Dylan's face, he's great at stepping up into a pocket. So you don't come at him from the sides. You run blitzes that bring people right up in his face. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that. And I think it's going to be a very long day for Dylan. I think we're going to struggle offensively. And so 17 points would be great. But I'm going to say we're going to score 13 points. And it's going to be – they're going to at least match what Indiana did. So I'm going to say 59 to 13. That's what it's going to be. And I hope that we can, like you said, get out of it without too many injuries. And Coach Rule has an attitude. He goes into every game to win it. So he's not going to do what a lot of coaches would do. Most coaches, right? And this, I think this is actually an error in Coach Rule's part. I think you have to recognize the significance of these kinds of public displays of ineptitude, right? And so you need to run the football and get the hell out of Dodge. You need to shorten that game so that your defense has to play as few snaps as possible. You need to secure the football. You need to try to just get as many first downs as you can, occupy the clock as much as you can, and run that damn clock, knowing that you don't have the personnel or the confidence as a team to actually pull an upset. Now Indiana plays Ohio State. That's a different story. Indiana's a team that is playing above their talent level because their confidence is so high and they're executing at such a high level. That's a team I would be worried about if I was Ohio State. Nebraska, no. That's blood in the water, man. That's chum. They're gonna be eating us like chum.
Eat us like chum. Right. To your point of being aggressive in this game and still trying to pass it a lot and try to get back into the game.
Be a bad idea.
Right. I think, you maybe experiment with that, in the first quarter, right? And see, if you actually manage to go up on Ohio State or keep it close or whatever, then you can kind of play with that mentality, right? Of, we're in this thing, we can try to make an upset. Let's try to make them nervous. But if, you go down 28-7 real quick or whatever, you kind of know, okay, this is the trend line of the game. Let's just get out of here, like you say.
Yeah. I mean, the three things that all work against Nebraska right now: the most recent data points. Ohio State, their last game they lost to Oregon. They are going to come with some heat. The Dillon connection to Ohio State, and then our absolute disastrous performance at Indiana.
And number 4, they have a bye week.
Correct. That's right. Which I think a lot of the teams that we play from here on out, it's either their homecoming game or they have a bye week before the game or both. Pretty much from now on.
Yeah. Well, we always said, right, this second half of the season was the tougher half of the season, right? So we were hoping we'd make it to this point against Indiana and be 7-0, right? That was the dream. That would have been great. Instead, we're 5-2, with some ugly wins in there, right? So we're kind of in a middle ground, right? It's not the best case scenario, but it's also not the worst case scenario, right? We did beat Colorado, we did beat Purdue and things like that. So now, now is where our medal, right, and Rule's ability to keep this team focused and believing in his message, right, rather than reverting like we did last year. This is where that's really going to be tested.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
There was one piece of good news in Husker Nation after the Indiana game, which was that we had a 4-star offensive tackle named Julian Marks who flipped his commitment over to Nebraska. And as you mentioned, we've had some offensive tackle issues this year, so hey, we'll take him.
Right. Well, and he also is a D lineman as well, so I don't know which side of the ball they'll end up using him on. But I think in some circles he's considered a defensive lineman. Either way, we need him.
Right. We'll take him. All righty. And so then in week 8 of college football, like I mentioned, had a lot of good games in it. Some of which I didn't get the chance to watch on Saturday. Like I mentioned, I went and did some other things, had some errands to do that day. But the big one that everyone had their eye on was, of course, Texas-Georgia. I predicted that Georgia would win 24-17, while you predicted that Texas would win 35-21. And I ended up winning out on that one. It was 30-15, so not too far from my score, a W for Georgia.
Yeah, that was impressive.
In certain ways, yes. It was actually kind of an ugly game on both sides. Each team had 3 turnovers. So Georgia coughed up the ball, and then Texas coughed up the ball right back. And Georgia actually went up 20-0 by halftime. So it was a terrible first half for Texas. But they made some adjustments in the second half.
Right. I mean, I don't remember what moment in time it was in the first half, but it was somewhat late in the first half. And I think Texas had 15 yards of total offense. It was just crazy. I mean, they really did get shut down in that first half, but you knew that there would be adjustments and that things would happen. And then, of course, the bugaboo that always seems to show up in the state of Texas when it has to do with the University of Texas, weird, crazy things start to happen.
Right.
I would love an analysis of the second half of that game and the guy who was running the clock. I would like to know how many additional seconds, maybe additional minutes, he was able to accomplish for his home team by the way that he manipulated that clock. Because it was blowing me away as this game was winding down. I mean, the amount of time it took to end the game from about 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter till the end of the game was just mind-boggling to me. And I got to give the guy credit. He did a great job, because I don't think he never took a play off or didn't run the clock for a play, but he found a way to start that clock a second or two after the game, after the play started, and then stopping it maybe a little bit before, in anticipation of the end of the play or something along those lines. I mean, it's just amazing to me how no time ran off that clock. It was ridiculous.
I wasn't paying that close of attention, so I would have to go back and do an analysis on that.
Well, I would love it if somebody would.
But of course, the play that everybody was talking about after the game was this pass interference call on a interception, where the Texas guy intercepted it from the Georgia player, ran it back a good ways, towards the
Yes.
goal line, so they would have in great field position. I think that was when the game was like 7-23 or something like that. So
Yep.
Texas still had the chance to come back. The crowd was roaring, of course, but there was a flag on the field, and they called pass interference on the Texas player who intercepted the ball.
Right.
And I will say, watching, because I was not actually watching the game live at that moment, you texted me about it, and I had to ask what was going on. I
Yeah.
was kind of tuning in and out because, Georgia looked like they were going to run away with it.
Right.
But looking at the play itself, it definitely is a questionable pass interference. It was not clear cut because the Georgia guy ran into the Texas defender pretty aggressively, and like they were pushing at each other. So I could see a ref saying, it was kind of both guys were pushing and shoving. You call it
Right.
a draw.
But yes, exactly. And I get that. But after you make the play call, right? And then all kinds of other stuff happens, and they end up huddling for a reason that appeared to be for a different purpose, and then magically things changed.
Right. They fans, of course, were booing the call, which isn't surprising. But they took it the extra step of tossing, bottles and trash onto the field
Right.
that then they had to
Which
clean up.
right. And that caused a delay.
That caused the delay, like you say. They huddled.
Right. And they did not throw a flag. I thought they were huddling to say, do we need to throw a flag on the home crowd for this behavior? Because that's completely inappropriate. Like, I mean, people are getting hit with those things, right? You can't do that. Period.
Right.
Can't do it. They, as for reference, okay, there was a Nebraska Colorado game way back, like I think in the late '90s, even when we were part of the Big 12 together, and Colorado's student section was throwing bottles because they didn't like or we were going for a field goal or something, and they were throwing snowballs and bottles and stuff out, and the referee stopped the game and got on the PA and removed the student section from the game and stopped the game for like 15 minutes and had the ushers file out all the students, and the entire student section was removed because that's where they were mostly coming from.
Interesting.
That's how you know what? That's never happened again
I was going to
for a
say,
long, long time.
that is probably the most extreme measure that you could take as a
Absolutely.
ref.
Well, people were getting hit. Guys were getting hit, and the bottles were full of urine. Some of them, frozen and unfrozen.
Right. Okay. Well, so I guess then there's what they did, which was the most, pleasing to the crowd. The middle step where they throw a flag of some sort on the crowd and penalize the team,
Right.
but don't kick out the student section. And then on the other end is the most extreme where you stop the game for significant time to remove the offending
Right.
individuals.
Right. But they, in this case, there was no flag. They were not penalized at all for the bottles on the field. And after their long little socializing gathering that they had, they reversed the call on the pass interference.
Right.
I mean, so the throwing of the bottles led to a positive result for the team who threw the bottles.
Right. Now, just for reference, if they were to flag it, would you say that would just be an unsportsmanlike conduct on the crowd, yes, basically?
Well, on the team, it was very clearly a reaction to a negative event for Texas. There is absolutely no doubt who would be the ones that were the offending people in that circumstance. So yes, Texas should have been penalized. Okay. And you sure as hell wouldn't then give them the benefit of the doubt on the quote, quote, bad call. If anything, as a refereeing crew, since it's a judgment call that's not reversible by video replay, you as a staff, even if you're wrong, you stay the course with the decision you made because of the way that crowd reacted. Like a bunch of, what do I want to say? children. But I'm going to stay nice.
Yes, I could feel your urge to go us into the explicit category there. Yes, that was what was the most crazy about it, was that it's not like they were doing a formal review of the play, like you say. They were just conference saying, we thought they were talking about something else, because it's not a reviewable play, to your point. So the fact that they picked up the flag afterwards is even more, basically
Yes.
ridiculous.
And I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to lead to more shit being thrown on the field.
Well,
because other teams in other situations like that, Texas did it and they got the desired result. They got a positive result from that horrible behavior that should be completely This is not Europe. This is not, soccer, right? Where they go crazy and have riots in the stands and stuff. No, this is United States American football, and we do not allow that. That's why we have all the referees that we have, right? You keep control of the situation. And in a situation like that, man, you do not give the benefit of the doubt to the team or the fan base that just abused you. And yet those guys, classic to form in countless other examples that we could go into, Alex, if we wanted to make this podcast long, where the University of Texas, whether it be in football, basketball, baseball, it doesn't matter, women's volleyball, it does not matter. If it's the University of Texas, and particularly if it's in the state of Texas, there is just a massive amount of corruption that has followed that university. And it's disgusting to me.
Well, and I will say the SEC, to their credit, are doing the right thing. They're like fining the university for what happened. But the University of Texas can pay a fine. To your point, they got the reward they wanted in the game, and it does set a bad precedent for sure. And frankly, I think maybe not the whole ref crew, but at least the head ref who was in charge there or whatever shouldn't ref again. I think it's a disgrace.
Well, but the thing is though, is that they're having so much trouble even getting referees, right? Which is a whole nother topic for us to discuss. That I think with all the money involved and all the shifting and changes, and now that the athletes are going to be getting a portion of the compensation, the revenues, and we're having to share revenue. The individual conferences, particularly the SEC and the Big Ten, they need to step up and maybe enter into some kind of collective agreement of referees and pool money so that they can pay referees more money, and so that they can incentivize referees to be better, so they can increase the amount of training that the referees get in the off season, and then we can hold them to a higher standard. I mean, we really need to gravitate to the NFL model, where a lot of the referees, that's what they do, is referee. That's their job. Where back in the day, and even now, most collegiate referees, they're teachers during the week. They're lawyers. They're doctors. They're and somehow independent entrepreneurs that have the flexibility to be able to fly and make the schedules the way they have to be a part of a refereeing crew. But it's not their primary job. It's not their primary income.
Right.
And that maybe has to change so that we can get people who are more committed to the sport. You need to be exercising. You need to, you have to have a physical test that you have to pass. I don't know what the standards are now, but whatever they are, they got to be raised. and you can only do that if you're going to pay them more.
Right. Well, you're reminding me. I remember I saw one particular NFL clip earlier this year, from some game where, it was a big pass play and the wide receivers running towards the end zone, booking it. And there's like a pretty young referee who's like keeping pace with him. And everyone was like, damn, that referee, they should be hiring him to play on one of these teams or whatever. So to your point, that's the NFL for you. And obviously it's tougher in college because you have so many more games than in the NFL. Right. But, there should be something for sure. They should be being paid, right. Some reasonable amount, that lets them dedicate, at least like the fall season, right? Like, okay, it's not your full-time job year round or whatever, but during these months of the year, yes, it is your job.
Well, and that if you increase the compensation, then typically in the supply and demand environment, more people will be motivated to say, hey, I want to do that. That would be a great, in this age of side gigs, that's an ultimate side gig to have, right?
Yeah, definitely. All right. We've spent quite a bit of time on this game, so probably time to move on.
Yes.
There was also the Alabama-Tennessee game. I predicted that Alabama would win that one narrowly, 48-42. Well, you predicted a narrow victory for Tennessee, 27-24. And sure enough, it went your way, and Tennessee ended up winning that one with the final score being 24-17. So just a little bit lower scoring than you were expecting.
Right. Well, and, Alabama has some problems on defense, and actually their defense played a little better than I thought. But Tennessee's defense played really well. Their defense seems to be pretty darn good because, Alabama's offense is good. I don't care what anybody says. They got some serious talent on that side of the ball. But Milroe, who had some really good plays, did not overall have a very good game. Right?
Yeah.
He has underperformed to the point where I think he's, no longer really a candidate for the Heisman Trophy.
Definitely
not. Right. And he's just, I think he's pressing a little bit too much. And part of it is because I think he feels like he needs to score every time he touches the ball.
Right. Well, and frankly, Tennessee's quarterback didn't play great either. They had 3 turnovers while Alabama had 2. So Tennessee was actually down on the turnover margin, and Alabama was up 7-0 with 7 minutes left to go in the third quarter. Alabama missed 2 long field goals while Tennessee missed 1 long field goal of their own earlier in the game. So both teams had some struggles on special teams, but Alabama was able to really stuff them on defense. Like I mentioned, they got all those turnovers from Tennessee. And it was only later in the game that Tennessee finally got some big plays and got some things going.
Yeah. It was an entertaining game because it was close and, it was in doubt until, pretty late and all that. But I also would say it was ugly, right? Just like you described the Georgia-Texas game was ugly. And so I think teams are kind of making each other's look ugly, right? Because of the defenses, because of the mistakes that are being made on offense, which are kind of being forced by what those players are seeing. To relate it back to Nebraska, I think everybody's ratcheted up the complexity of what they're doing, and they're bringing the heat, and quarterbacks aren't as comfortable as they were earlier in the year.
Right. Well, also I was going to mention, because I noticed that too, how there have been a lot of kind of messy games, even though we're at the midpoint of the season, right? So you want to expect that to be as prevalent.
You expect more people to look like Indiana,
right? Who is executing very well. But it doesn't feel like there's any one team that's a real standout, right? Like in past years, we had Alabama or Georgia or Clemson, right? Who would be clearly, a step above the competition, right? But, Oregon, right, is now the number 1 team in the country because Texas lost. But even Oregon, nearly lost to Ohio State, right? Some people say they should have lost, and they had their own struggles against like Nevada and things like that earlier in their year. So I don't really see evidence that anybody is a step above this year. There's kind of the top tier teams that are all kind of on a similar level. And then, kind of the Indianas below them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But so that's, another loss for Alabama, and that's going to bring up a topic I want to mention later. We also had kind of a surprise upset with Michigan losing to Illinois. Now, Illinois was actually ranked 2 spots higher in the AP poll, 22 versus Michigan's 24, and it was a home game for Illinois. But I still would have expected Michigan to beat that team, considering that we should have beaten that team, right? We were up on them until they made their comeback in the fourth quarter. But Unfortunately, Michigan is still having major struggles with their quarterback. They had 3 turnovers, and actually another one that got overturned by a penalty on Illinois' side, and then Michigan turned the ball over the next play anyways, so it didn't really matter. Both had a blocked field goal.
Right.
But yeah, I'm sure Brian is not pleased with the current situation.
Well, and much like the Nebraska press, who fire Satterfield, fire Foley, fire the wide receivers coach. Everybody, the sky is falling. Then there's kind of a similar reaction in Michigan. The really rabid Michigan fans are just not accepting this. This is unacceptable. We have a 5-star quarterback sitting on the bench, and you guys are refusing to play him when everyone in front of him is playing like shit. It's time to bring out the boy, because Nebraska's doing it. All these other schools are doing it. You can't afford to basically let your season go down the tubes like this, just because you're wanting to protect this 5 stars, year of eligibility. And frankly, they're getting close, right? I mean, we're going into game 8 here, right? So as soon as Michigan gets past game 8, then there's 4 games left. That kid can play 4 games. So I don't know how many games he's played in, but if he hasn't played in any, they're going to be able to play him the last 4 games of the year. And he may change the dynamic of Michigan's team.
Yeah. So 21-7, big victory for Illinois. But that kind of brings up a topic I wanted to mention, just about these big coaching changes, right? Because you think about the 4 teams that made the playoff last year, right? Yeah, Texas, Alabama, Michigan, and Washington. And 3 of those had major coaching shakeups, right? Alabama, Washington, and Michigan. And all 3 are struggling this year. Now, I think all 3 lost some talent, right, from that previous year. That certainly is affecting them. But I think you can't discount, the fact that all 3 kind of lost successful coaches, and that the new guys are kind of struggling to fill the shoes, especially DeBoer having to fill Saban's shoes, right? Everyone's saying, "Oh, Saban never would have lost to Vanderbilt. Saban never would have let this happen."
Yeah, well, but actually, you're right. You're hitting right on it, Alex. I mean, stability and culture, that's built based on that head coach and what he values, right? What you emphasize, what you focus on is the things that get better, right? That's just the way it is. And so these new coaches are all having to go through that transition. And in every case, the teams, had less talent for sure after the graduation of a talented classes. But then they also had the additional loss of all these coaches. And so then, now every guy is learning new stuff. Nobody's comfortable. And it might take a couple of years, but I would expect most of those coaches will still be good. They're going to be fine in the years to come.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And like you say, it's, definitely way too early to be judging, Sharon Moore at Michigan and DeBoer at Alabama, right? You got to give them some more time to get their legs under them. But certainly the expectations are very high at those schools.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you got to make sure you really know what you're doing, i.e. the Nebraska experience, where, we saw a team that, probably was the best team in the nation in 1999 and just had a slight stumble early in the year that they couldn't overcome, but ended up playing in a bowl game and crushing a team that was in the thick of the national championship. And we probably were, if not, if there had been a playoff at that time, we probably win it in 99. And Frank then has a national championship of his own, and that totally changes the trajectory of Nebraska football. But it doesn't happen. And then 2 years later, We're undefeated again. We have a Heisman Trophy winner, but we get our asses run out of town by one game at Colorado, right? End of the year. And Colorado boat races us, but we still end up playing for the national championship, even though, we were exposed, and we lose comfortably to Miami, and they win the national title. We don't, but that's the last gasp of Nebraska football. And 2 years later, we're firing Frank Solich.
Right. Now, obviously, I know there was, some recruiting issues as well that wasn't helping Frank's case and things like that. But yeah, right. It goes to show you, right, how just a couple crucial games can change the trajectory of an entire program.
Exactly. And if somebody isn't recruiting well in this environment, and that's the thing, Frank was always an excellent coach. In fact, he was also an excellent recruiter himself. What he struggled with was being the CEO. And that's a huge jump, right? From being basically he was the running backs coach and assistant head coach, because Tom Osborne retained his whole career offensive coordinator position, right? He did both, which is very rare in today's day and age. So Frank was good at all that stuff. He just wasn't great at the football recruiting side, the organizing side. Well, bring him in some help, right? Hire some people to take some of those things off his plate to help organize him and that sort of stuff, but let him continue to do the things he does really well. But instead, we fired him.
Right. Well, and if we had been in today's day and age, right, you bring in a whole recruiting staff to help him, right? And right. You don't have a limit on assistants, that kind of thing,
Exactly.
And maybe he continues and is a big success for us.
Exactly. And so if you're at Michigan, or you're at Alabama and you're the AD, you and DeBoer struggles, say, for 3 years in a row, you know what? You don't fire him. You find out what is his weakness, what is he not doing well, and let's get some people. Let's give him the resources he needs to shore up those weaknesses, and then let's keep going.
Yeah. Well, if he really struggles for 3 years in a row, I don't know if Alabama fans will have the patience, but we'll
that's
see.
That's my point. Well, neither did Nebraska. That's my point.
Right. All right. And then the other game I wanted to talk about that was quite fun to watch the highlights for was Maryland versus USC, where they beat USC by 1 point, 29-28. Interestingly, Maryland had a pretty big mistake of their own. They were at the 27-yard line of USC at the end of the half, and were trying to go fast and had a bad snap that went way behind them, and a USC guy picked it up, so they could have probably gotten a field goal there, instead got out of there with 0 points. In fact, it was 21-7 USC's favor with 9 minutes to go in the third quarter when Maryland scored again and brought it to just a one-score game.
Right.
And in fact, Maryland had another huge mistake later on where they threw a pick in their own end zones. They're on fourth downs. They had the potential to score. Instead, they threw the pick in the end zone.
Right.
But they were willing to go for it on fourth down on a number of occasions. They went for a 2-point conversion earlier in the game that got them that extra point that ended up being crucial. And then they blocked a USC field goal at the 2-minute mark. It was a 41-yard field goal. And from there, they scored within 1 minute to go up by 1. And then USC tried to drive it back, but USC threw one pick earlier in the game. But on that particular drive, I think they just got stopped. It went Maryland's way. So another tough loss for USC and Lincoln Riley.
Right. It's the fourth one this season, right? That's a one-score game. You know how we keep talking about Nebraska's history of losing all these close one-score games? Welcome to the Big Ten. Where everybody has equal talent, equal money, equal resources. Not equal talent, but approximately equal talent. And if you don't have, a complete football team, if you have some fundamental weaknesses, then a lot of other teams are going to, if they're stable, are going to be able to identify those weaknesses and successfully defend you. And the Loxley's been there a number of years now, and he's starting to establish himself. And they're not doing great. In fact, Maryland's having a tough year, but that doesn't mean they're not talented. Who was it that just beat Iowa? Oh, it was Michigan State.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Michigan State's got a brand new head coach, first year, right? His guys are just getting their legs underneath them, and Iowa's, the most established program in the conference, and they lose because the resources are there, the money is there, the coaches are good. It's really hard to win week in and week out in this league.
Right. Well, and I will say, we know that Lincoln Riley didn't want to play with the big boys because when Oklahoma announced they were going to the SEC, right? It was that season where Lincoln Riley left
he bailed
for USC, and he was happy to be the king of the Pac-12. And then the Pac-12 fell apart, and now he's in the Big Ten, right? So he kind of couldn't escape it.
Exactly. And I don't know that he's real happy about it, right? Because I have a feeling his plan was to be probably leaving for the NFL. I mean, if you think about, the series of Heisman Trophy winning type quarterbacks he had, someone was going to pick him off and give him a shot in the NFL if he had been able to continue that success. But it's going to be harder for him to do that now.
Yep.
Here in the Big Ten.
Yep. And two other games I just want to mention real quick. South Carolina thrashed Oklahoma pretty good, 35-9, and Duke beat Florida State 23-16. So Florida State also still struggling.
Oh my gosh, well, and that's the thing. Now the Florida State thing, that is a collapse, right? I mean, there's no other way to describe that. And Oklahoma is trending in a negative way. And if they have a couple more losses like they had this past weekend, they will start being defined as a collapse. And that is not a good way for them to begin their time in the SEC. I'll just say that. They're going to find out how hard it is to close the deal on recruits if they continue to struggle. And I'm speaking of Oklahoma. And as far as Florida State's concerned, if it wasn't for the fact that Florida State is in the state of Florida and they have so much talent right outside their back door, I would be even more concerned about Florida State. Florida State will always have talent, but they might very well write the big check and try to go seek another coach.
Even 1 year after, they had the undefeated season and should have made the playoffs, I know it has been a collapse and Norvell hasn't handled it well.
Well, and that's the key. Norvell hasn't handled it well, right? I mean, well, like I was just promoting this idea of stability. You got to stay with your coach. You got to figure out what he needs, right? What his weaknesses are, and give him support in those areas so that he can be successful. But people were saying last year that Florida State's successful season was smoke and mirrors, right? And the fact that they then played so poorly in their bowl game and stuff, and then all of what's happened since then, there's all these reasons for longtime fans and boosters to really question the direction that the quote quote direction the program's going in. And if you could pinpoint one or two things and say, well, these are the things that are wrong, and it might involve getting rid of some coaches and getting some new coordinators or something. I don't know, but again, some major changes are going to have to happen in that program.
Right. Yeah, and I wouldn't put much stock in that bowl game because, so many of their players didn't even play in it and everything. But they did win a lot of close games last year to get that undefeated record. That part is true. So then you look over his whole body of work and you put a little, sometimes you put an asterisk on a bad season. In this case, maybe you put an asterisk on his good season and you have to review his trend of where his program is and where the culture is and how do the players feel about their chances for success long term and all those kinds of things. And you might need to say, hey, I don't have the right guy because there's too many holes to fill. I got too many holes in this boat. Right.
So it's better to go buy a new boat.
Right.
But if you got something where you can see all the things are clicking, but we just got a couple of things that aren't right, then you try to address those couple of things.
Right. All right. And now looking ahead to week 9, there actually are quite a few interesting games, especially in the SEC this week. LSU is playing against Texas A&M. That's a home game for A&M. LSU is ranked 8th, while Texas A&M is ranked 14th. I'm sure that LSU is probably slightly favored, but I don't know. I think playing at home with Texas A&M, in a season where they're doing pretty well, I think that environment will be pretty tough for LSU.
I totally agree. Remember, this is an LSU team that lost to USC.
True. And we just talked about USC.
We did.
So I'll go ahead and predict that Texas A&M wins a pretty close one. Let's say 35-28 over LSU.
Okay. I'm going to agree with you on that. I'm going to go with a lower score. I think it's going to be a lower scoring thing. So I'm going to say 24-17.
I like it. And then Alabama, right, off the heels of their kind of recent losses, now has to go play Missouri. Now Missouri has also kind of been knocked off their high horse. They've had some losses of their own, and it is a home game for Alabama. So what do you think? Do you think Mizzou has a shot?
I'm going to pick Alabama. I mean, and maybe this is, historic bias that I'm still hanging on to here. But I'm a big believer in DeBoer. I really am. I mean, long term, I think that was a great hire by them at Alabama, and I think the payoff is going to happen at some point. And I think Missouri has some incredible pieces, but they're an incomplete team, and a team like Alabama at home should be able to rally and bring it together. Now, the one caveat would be, this is an Alabama team that might start to have a little bit of that China doll syndrome starting to creep up, where if Missouri can keep it close and create that doubt in Alabama, the fan base, the collective, gasp in that stadium can work against them and work against Alabama and help Missouri. But I think, generally speaking, that the chance of that is very slim. So I'm going to go with Alabama to win, and I think Alabama is going to be pretty explosive. So I think it's going to be more like 42-28.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I don't disagree, but here is my counterpoint. Missouri had a close win over Vanderbilt, where they only won 30-27 in overtime. But that doesn't look so bad considering Vanderbilt then beat Alabama. And
Kentucky, didn't they, this last week? They also won this last week. Who did they beat? Vanderbilt followed it up with another big win.
Well, you're right. They beat Kentucky, I think, the previous week before
2
this
weeks.
one.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
And then I don't know who they played this past week. But I'm also saying here that Missouri also had a bye.
Oh.
So they had 2 weeks to prepare for this game, while Alabama's coming off a disappointing loss to Tennessee. So I'm going to predict that with even though it's an away game for Mizzou, it's in Alabama, that Mizzou is able to win a nail biter, and Alabama loses another close one. I think they'll have to keep the score lower to do that. So let's say Missouri wins 27-24 over Alabama.
Okay, that's a great observation about the bye week. I didn't remember that, and that does change the complexion of it. I probably should not have had my optimism hat on quite so strongly for Alabama, but I'll stay with it.
All right. And then we won't give score predictions here, but we'll just briefly talk about them. There's the classic Notre Dame Navy game. Navy is actually ranked 24th, while Notre Dame's ranked 12th. So that is a bit of an interesting game. And then in Michigan, there's the classic Michigan State rivalry game. It is a home game for Michigan, so it's in Ann Arbor. But like you said, MSU is coming off a win over Iowa, while Michigan is dealing with their quarterback crisis. So are you smelling MSU win there?
God, I especially since it's at MSU, right? So
no, at Michigan.
It's at Michigan. Oh man, This game is really important to both schools. So it would not completely surprise me if the redshirt freshman, or I mean, if the five-star freshman might not start, but he might play in this game if things don't go well early for Tuttle. So, and I think if they bring in the five-star, then maybe things change a little bit because they still have a great running back, Michigan, and they have some talent. So I'm going to say Michigan still wins it.
I'll go ahead and go for the upset because I guess I'm in that mood right now. So I'll say that MSU pulls it off their positive momentum.
Well, I kind of hope you're right, but
and then in the Big Ten, there's some interesting games. Indiana, after playing us, have to play Washington. Oregon has to play Illinois after they beat Michigan, and then Penn State is playing against Wisconsin.
Wow, those are all some great games. I mean, that's a great slate for the Big Ten, except for the clunker that they now have at Big Noon with Nebraska, Ohio State. But that Indiana-Washington game, that's at Washington, I'm assuming, yes?
No, it is a home game for Indiana. They had 2 home games in a row.
Oh, wow. Well, then, based on what I saw, I really do expect Indiana to win that game then.
Yeah, I would agree. I think.
If it was out in Washington, I might have gone the other way. But I think if they get a play in that same environment, you got to believe that the fan base is just going to be through the roof, rabid and energized, and will be there in big numbers.
Yeah.
And Washington has kind of been up and down.
Right. I personally don't have faith in the Illinois-Oregon game. It's at home for Oregon. I think they'll handle Illinois pretty good. The Penn State game, though, that is a home game for Wisconsin. So even though Penn State's ranked number 3 in the whole nation, I think Wisconsin has the chance to make it interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. Wisconsin has started looking really good here recently. They're playing way better than they were earlier in the season. So I would say that's going to be a tight game. But I do believe Penn State does pull that out. And I agree with you. I think Oregon probably wins comfortably over Illinois. Now, it'll still be a fairly low scoring game because Illinois uglies up every game. That's their modus operandi. They just don't let you get over the top of them very easily. But Oregon has the kind of speed. And Oregon was running away from Ohio State. That's how fast Oregon is. And I think that speed is something that heretofore Illinois hasn't seen. And when those running backs turn the corner, those linebackers are going to be like, wow, why is that guy running down the field? So I think Oregon wins that one.
All right. Well, we're in agreement there. Maybe another tough week for Husker fans. I'm not sure I'll be able to stomach the whole Ohio State game if it goes the way I think it's going to go. But like I said, our goal is to, not get blown out, not get embarrassed, hopefully. Just get out of there with as few injuries as possible and focus your mentality on that crucial UCLA game.
Well, and so what you got to do in this game is you just got to play football. You got to play football for the joy of playing football, and you got to be locked in for every snap. And coaches, you need to do a better job. You need to prepare the team better, and Coach White, you need to call better plays. Coach Satterfield, you got to call better plays. And then the guys got to execute. And so it's a whole team thing. And we can't just lay our heads down and allow it to be 28-0 at the end of the first quarter. I mean, that's the part that frustrated me about the Indiana game. It was we just, it's not the end of the world to give up a first drive. It's okay. But then to catch the ball on the 2-yard line and basically put yourself behind the 8 ball and then, make a couple of other bonehead, we really were lucky that it was only 14-7 with 4 minutes to go in the half. But it very easily could have ended in a tie at the half too. So just if we don't fumble.
Yeah.
So it's that score is lopsided, but the game, as you pointed out statistically, was not as lopsided as the score indicates. But the way they ran through us in the second half, and that appearance of giving up, is the part that irks Nebraska fans.
Yes. Well, yeah, it doesn't help that, we've been through this song and dance so many times over this past decade, that's part of the reason why I didn't watch more, because I knew how it was going to go. I've been through too many of these situations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All righty.
All right. Well, hope you all there enjoyed listening to this episode. You can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also search for us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a rating or a review there. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.